So I should start by prefacing this discussion by overall saying that it's going to be a discussion about my lived experience. There will be topics such as violence and aggression. There will be topics of suicide and suicidal ideation. And so I just want to give everyone a word of warning before we even go into this, because if there's one thing that I hope that I'm able to convey today is the importance of talking about mental health and seeing how it factors into all of our lives. And so I just wanted to give that bit of a warning, but now I'd like to start the presentation by starting off with a quote. So, martial arts is like a mountain. You see the top, and you hike and you climb, and you finally reach the peak, and then you realize it was a false summit, and in front of you lies an entirely new mountain range. The more that I think about this quote, the more that I see the similarities between the experiences of learning and training in the martial arts and the parallels it holds with living a life with a mental health challenge. My name is Alberto Almeida. I'm a 34-year-old Latin American male with a love of wildlife, automobiles, culture, and the martial arts. I worked as a project manager for the last 3.5 years in the mental health sector specifically, and I've coordinated projects over the last 10 years. But perhaps most importantly, I have lived and I continue to live with major depressive disorder. And this has been a part of my life for the last 15 years and even more than that. Today, I am absolutely honored to have the opportunity to share my story with each and every one of you. It's a story about the pervasiveness of depression. It's a story that gives credit to Muay Thai, the art of boxing from Thailand, and how it has been a form of support in some of the most challenging of times for me. And lastly, I hope, if all goes well, that it is a story of optimism, especially for individuals who can be going through different circumstances similar to the ones that I have gone through in the past. First, I'd like to start by a show of hands. You can either use an emoji or you could do it in person. But by a show of hands, how many of us have a loved one in our lives who lives with a mental health challenge? And I'm seeing a lot of hands go up. And by a similar show of hands, how many of us know exactly what to do when that person is going through a mental health challenge? It's sad when you actually think about that concept, right? How so many hands can go up, and at the exact same moment, we may not know necessarily what to do in those exact moments. As we look around the table, we can see how mental health challenges can affect the lives of all of us. One Statistics Canada stat indicated that over the time period of COVID, approximately 21% of Canadians demonstrated symptoms of either major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, or post-traumatic stress disorder. From personal experiences and working at the acute level, part of my role included reviewing instances of post-discharge suicides that would also occur as well. Unfortunately, I learned firsthand stories about how COVID and the sense of isolation would drive individuals to attempt to die by suicide, all due to the changing in social circumstances that resulted from COVID. Today, I'd like to share with you a story about my depression and emphasize that the disorder, for myself, was more than just a mental health condition. It is a pervasive, elusive, normal feeling illness that is capable of zapping one's energy and made myself feel that I could barely do the simplest of tasks and convince my brain that I was nothing more than my condition. And by the end of the day, I hope that you're able to see the resilience for all of those individuals who live with a mental health challenge. And ultimately, I'd love to be able to showcase how physical activity can play a huge part in the recovery of someone who is experiencing a mental health challenge. So first, let me start by giving you a little bit of background about myself. I grew up in a low-income area in the city of Toronto. I, like many of my friends, were children of immigrants who struggled to make ends meet. My mother, a Chilean who left after the government was overthrown in the 1970s, and my father, an Ecuadorian who sought a better life in Canada. Both of them started off in the Black Creek area of Toronto, which for anyone who's familiar with the area, is an area stigmatized for its crime and violence within the city. I grew up in an area where there was this pervasive belief that all young, racialized males were bound to end up in a criminal justice system and needed to know how to defend themselves from threats of physical violence. In fact, I grew up in a single parent household, and one of my strongest memories that I had of my father was when he was teaching me how to fight. He expressed to me that no one should ever make you feel weak. And if someone was to challenge you, be ready to defend yourself. He taught me how to throw a punch, making sure that the weight of the shoulder would shift from one to the next, like the smooth motion of a pendulum. Truth be told, I was more interested in Pokemon cards, my Game Boy, and whether the crush of my life actually even noticed that I existed. But this was the lesson that I was being taught at the time, and so I decided to listen as attentively as I could. So when I was younger, and even until today, I still have no desire to fight or cause pain to any other individual. In fact, probably one of the biggest misconceptions about the martial arts is that the aim is to solely inflict pain on others, and that the types of individuals who take up martial arts are individuals who experience aggression or behavioral issues. For me, martial arts was always about discipline and learning how to successfully de-escalate and avoid conflicts, also providing me with a sense of peace, knowing that if I could defend myself and my loved ones, then I would be good. Violence has and is not an interest of mine. And yet in the environment where I was immersed, violence was something that scared me. And it's something that I also experienced as well. More so in terms of physical aggression, when I was 15 and 16 years old, I was robbed on 2 separate occasions. The first time was right before I started working my shift at a local McDonald's. I was at the age of 15 when it happened. I went into the washroom, and by the time I started to walk out, there was a young man who stood right in front of the exit. He looked me right in the eye and said, "You wouldn't happen to have some money that I could use to get some food, would you?" Something felt off about the question. And so in recognizing what was happening, I said, "Scared? No, I'm sorry, I don't have anything," and attempted to walk away. He looked at me. He scoffed. And he said, "I know you have something in your pockets." At that point, I was terrified. I didn't know what was going to happen. He walked out, grabbed 2 of his friends, who decided to come back into the bathroom and pin me against the wall. The main individual decided to empty out my pockets and took all the change that I had, all $3.75 of it. I felt weak, helpless, and ultimately really sad. There, in that moment, I remember feeling that I wish I could defend myself. But also as an adult looking back, I also know how many more challenges and problems I could have caused as well. I could have put my life at risk. My mental health was also impacted that day, because as I mentioned, I felt weak, I felt helpless, I felt incapable. Then, during a second instance, I remember I was waiting for the bus, and I was on the phone with a partner at the time, and another young man walked up to me and asked me for bus fare. I looked in my pockets, I gave him a bus ticket, and while doing that, he started looking at my phone. He said it was really, really nice and asked me if he can take a look at it. And I went like this. I showed him the face of my phone. And in that moment, it was ripped out of my hand. And he told me that if there's anything that I tried to do in order to get my phone back, that he would stab me there and then, directing my attention to the knife in his pocket. He threatened to kill me. I'm happy to say that I can be here today in front of you because in both those circumstances, I was not only able to get my money back later on, also without harm, but these experiences spoke to the environment that I grew up within. And this was an environment where physical threats can and did occur, and how varying life circumstances could make you feel small. That sense of smallness, that was what I felt when I was going through mental health challenges. Sparked by a workplace injury at the age of 17, I suffer from chronic back pain. I worked as an automotive technician, and when myself and a colleague were moving a transmission out, he dropped his end, and I subsequently went down with the transmission. The best way to describe that day was imagine throughout your knees, all the way to your shoulders, 1,000,000 electrical bolts going throughout your entire spine. I went to the doctor. I ended up being on painkillers, and that was the start of a life with an injury. And while I endured this injury, depression entered into my life in a way that I could have never anticipated. Now, many people can have different descriptions of what depression is for them. Some could say chronic sadness, and I definitely think there's some truth to that. But for me, depression was much more than just about the concept of sadness. For me, in my worst days, especially in those days where the pain was at its highest, depression was a strong, pervasive adversary, which would use everything in its arsenal to ensure that I remained entranced in my own sense of brokenness, all with the aim of keeping myself there as long as it could. It ensured that there was a dark veil that was cast over my eyes, even during the most beautiful moments of my life. It tried to tell me that darkness and gloom was a reality, never allowing the full potency of beauty or love or anything wonderful to get through. It was a trickster, and it is a trickster, and it's a condition that teaches you to wear multiple masks. It also tells you to have them ready in your tool belt for whenever you need them, because you never know when you're going to interact with a friend, a family member, or any other individual. Depression rips away the good, and it promises you that only the bad is relevant. It ensures that you are unable to see the good, since it tries to give you this belief that you're undeserving of it to begin with. At least that's how my experience was. The depression and my inability to handle the challenges that I was facing led me to abruptly take myself off all my medications in my 20s. At that time, I was taking painkillers, antidepressants, and sleeping pills, all of which was just to manage the pain and the mental health challenges that I was experiencing at the time. Then, one day, I ran out of pills, and I decided that I wasn't going to continue doing this anymore. That maybe this was the way that I could get back to normal. I decided then and there that I had had enough of the side effects and that I was strong enough, because to live is to fight, right? And there's a saying in Latin that says, vivere militer est, which is where to live is to fight comes from. So I thought this was another time where I had to fight. And during that fight between myself and my brain, the bully in my brain was winning. I rationalized to myself that the pain and suffering for a few days would be worth it all. It'd be better than taking another prescription. And so night came, and I stopped taking my pills. And for the first night, I didn't sleep at all. I felt disoriented, but thought that as long as I could fight through it, I could get back to being normal. I could be myself again and lose the feeling of numbness that came with all the medications. So I persisted past day one. Then day two came, with no sleep whatsoever. I remember the pain kicking in and the suffering amplifying. The shoulders in my back felt like they were dislocating. My brain felt like it was on fire. My legs continued to feel numb. And ultimately, my heart felt like it was going to explode. I wandered through my home in the middle of the night, talking to myself, telling myself that I deserved the pain that I was going through, that I deserved everything that I was going through. The pain, the injury, the inability of others being able to understand what I was going through, the loneliness that ensued, everything. And so that night turned to morning, and there was nothing left to do but to cry my eyes out. This was the day of my withdrawal, and this was a day that I would never forget. The pain was excruciating. The headaches were pounding me into an oblivion, and I remember trying to make myself a tea, and I couldn't even muster up the strength to pick it up. My mom woke up that day and asked me what was wrong. And then I stopped crying, looked her in the eyes, and without any affect, I told her I wanted to die. At that moment, I was rushed to the doctor, and I had cried so much that every tear felt like it caused a new pounding headache. Every movement caused pain. Every thought was the comment of a bully that told me that this is what I deserved. This is what I had coming. Unfortunately, that was the first time that I contemplated death as a rational, romantic end to the suffering. Living on painkillers meant that I would have brief moments of relief. However, the pain would remain with me. It would be endless. And I remember in that moment, it seemed rational, since it'd be the absolution of all pain. It would have quieted the bully in me that resided in my head. It would have ended everything, something that at that time I can honestly say that I actually looked forward to. And so I remember coming up with a plan and telling my mom of what I was going to do. I remember sitting on the bed, going through the details, with the hope that I would feel something, anything. Luckily enough, I received help at that time. I spoke with the doctor who connected me with resources at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto, and I was placed in a cognitive behavioral therapy class. The only thing about that had to do with access. The waiting list to access the program, they told me, would take around 1 year. So my fight would continue. Luckily enough, at that point, I was working as a researcher for the sociology department at the University of Toronto. And I met another researcher who was on my team, who was not only kind, remarkably strong-willed and tough. I remember going to her and letting her know that I was going through some challenges and that I was currently on the wait list to receive supports. And then she asked me one question that is probably the reason as to why I'm standing in front of you today. Why don't you join me at my gym? My colleague was a ranked Muay Thai fighter, a community activist, a researcher, and a PhD candidate. The best way to describe her is that she was an absolute badass. She was the person that I wanted to become. She shared with me some of her experiences of life as well, told me what it was like to grow up in the challenging environment where she had, and now she had to fight professionally throughout her entire graduate degree, how the purses would contribute to paying for her tuition. She attributed Muay Thai to be the main reason as to why she was able to survive the stresses of grad school. And at that time, I wanted to endure the stresses of grad school. It was a goal of mine. She encouraged me to give Muay Thai a shot and let me know that it helped her immensely, so it could possibly help me too. Me, nervous at that time, decided, what the hell? I'll give it a shot. What's the worst that could happen? I stand here today being incredibly thankful that I did, since I can honestly say that it was one of the most enjoyable experiences I ever had when I was exercising. I was never one who enjoyed lifting weights. I never enjoyed doing cardio. So to find something that was exercise focused that I enjoyed felt like a wonderful discovery. And yet, I have to give credit to my colleague that if it wasn't for her encouragement for me to go, I would have never gone in the first place. And when I think about it, if it wasn't for me opening up and telling her about the depressive episodes that I went through, I would have never gotten the invitation. Now, the interesting thing is, I have to be honest, it came with barriers as well. The cost associated with doing Muay Thai was over $100 a month at the time. And that's a cost that's pretty similar at this time. As a student, I wasn't able to afford it too much. Second, the distance and finding a place that was close to my home also often proved challenging as well. Given that it was a specific type of martial art that I wanted to be involved in, only specific places had it. Third, the sense of exhaustion overall that would kick in would be enough to deter anyone. Required heart and discipline to keep going, especially when feeling like life was a struggle. But I knew that if I put my heart into it, then I could possibly do it. So I did. I felt very fortunate. I told my colleague all about these challenges, and luckily enough, our office was close, so we would go together. She ended up paying for my first month, and she motivated me to get better. Throughout my experience, Muay Thai provided me with 3 major insights in relation to my depression and my chronic pain, all of which can apply to any physical activity or high-intensity sport. First, it was the only activity that I was engaged in that I thoroughly enjoyed, and yet it was so intense that I did not have the time or attention to continue to do the one thing that depression does the most to someone, which is it causes you to ruminate. This was the first time something like this had ever happened to me. Muay Thai successfully interrupted the negative, automatic thoughts that would continue to ruminate throughout my brain on a regular basis and would convert those thoughts into trying to force my body to do things it had never done before. For example, I remember training one day and I was in my head the entire time. At the start of the class, I was so nervous because I had a very, very big job interview. It was like a dream job. And my anxiety was through the roof. I was scared. I was nervous. I was thinking that I was incapable of getting that job, but I knew that I was really good at it if they gave me a shot. By the end of each class, or by the end of that class in particular, I was not only in an absolute state of exhaustion, but felt proud of myself and was in a state of euphoria as well for getting it done. Long story short, that story had a bit of a happy ending. I ended up getting that job that I wanted. And I attributed that sense of confidence to getting out of my head and into my body, a gift I received from training in Muay Thai that day, and something that carried with me when I had that surge of energy when I went into the interview. Second, Muay Thai taught me that I didn't have to be perfect at anything. Trying was enough. Many of us may have similar experiences and may go through different challenges, whether it's in work, in relationships, or even managing our own mental wellness in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. The great thing about training is that I never had to be 100% perfect. For example, one of the best descriptions that I've ever read about perfectionism had to do with seeing perfectionism as a beautiful golden door. But whenever you open it, on the other side, you're always going to be met by a series of bricks that will never let you go through it. That is perfectionism, the door that no one is capable of going through, but everyone longs to go through. In Muay Thai, I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to try. This was a major source of comfort for me, since I knew that as long as I came in, remained humble, gave it my all, and tried, that would be enough. One thing that I became really grateful for were for the people that were in those gyms. I had often trained with ranked fighters who would go very, very slow. They'd help me master my craft, and they'd focus on me getting better first, as opposed to being fast and developing poor techniques. As a result, I can happily say I have 4 years of training under my belt and no intention of stopping anytime soon. Third, perhaps most interestingly, it allowed me to see this connection between physical activity and mental wellness. Mental wellness is interpreted as the intersection between the physical, the mental, the emotional, and spiritual health. I grew up religious and let go of those beliefs later on in my 30s. However, I always longed to find something that would satisfy that spiritual element to my life. And this time it was in a secular environment. Muay Thai also provided that for me as well. Muay Thai taught me that there's a sense of divinity in each one of us. That as a custom, when you walk into the gym, it is traditional to bow before you start and bow before you complete your training, because you're bowing to the divine in each individual. You're bowing to the divine in others. Personally, it always allowed me to provide a sense of gratitude for being able to go to the gym, especially after experiencing such a traumatic injury like the one that I had in my youth. It gave me a sense of pride that I could come into an environment like the one that I mentioned and leave the environment that I grew up in, which was quote unquote, the hood. The intersection between physical health and mental health overlapped in a way that I never understood before. As long as I tried, I would feel a sense of euphoria with completing each class, and I'd also receive this surge of energy as a result of it, kind of like a bonus gift. But perhaps most interestingly, it showed me how one needed the other. During my depression, my energy was zapped and my brain sought out every rationalization in the book to keep me motionless, to keep me stuck in my bed, with the aim of keeping me there for as much time as I could. And then throughout my journey, I remember reading another quote, and it goes like this. The brain responds to depression as it does any other illness, directing us to avoid activity, especially social activity, so that the body can focus on simply getting well. But there is one crucial difference. With the flu, such withdrawal symptoms help promote recovery. With depression, it only makes things worse. So, even though depressed patients feel right down to the core of their being that pulling away from others is going to help, it is only because their brain has been misled. In effect, depression tricks the brain into thinking it is something akin to an infectious illness that needs to be fought. So despite how much the depression took a toll on me, the introduction of Muay Thai provided me with a sense of empowerment that allowed me to take control back on two facets of my life, my mental health and my physical health. It gave the bully in my head less to complain about. Prior to Muay Thai, I would be stuck in my head with all those negative thoughts telling me how incapable I am and how broken I am ever since I had my injury. I remember that I went to my CBT class, or cognitive behavioral therapy sessions. They asked us to write down the things that brought me joy and sadness on a piece of paper and rank them from 1 to 10. I can honestly say Muay Thai was around 8 to 10. Studying was a strong 1. The thing about Muay Thai is that I did not expect there were a series of advantages that it would provide me in my life. On the one hand, it was absolutely terrifying to walk into a gym where people could literally damage you in a way that looked terrible, or at least that's how YouTube made it look. And it would incite a sense of fear in me, similar to what I had experienced when I was younger. However, Muay Thai also taught me that discipline served as an opportunity for me to also expose myself to something new. For example, when I entered the gym, I had a terrible amount of anxiety. I was scared that I would not have what it takes to finish off the class, that I was not fit enough to even complete the class, that others would look at me in a way and know that I was a novice, that I would never get good enough to actually protect myself. One of the things that I learned upon entering those gyms was that there were so many other people in the same shoes as myself. Not only was I among a series of beginners, the trained fighters worked with me to help me get better. They helped me see that through heart, discipline, and perseverance, one can get better. Perhaps one of the greatest components that came out of it for me was that it provided me with a sense of normalcy. I remember reading in sociology back in the day about this concept called Aanchel, which referred to a sense of normalness. This was the concept that was developed by Emile Durkheim in his book, Le Suicide, and he theorized that this was a key contributor to suicides in industrialized nations. Muay Thai provided me with this new normal that helped me serve my physical and mental wellness in a way that it had not been helped before. And then COVID hit. So I'll be honest, during the pandemic, especially with all the changes, I went approximately 18 months doing minimal training, but realized that I need to do something else to manage my depression. Interestingly enough, my experiences in Muay Thai gave me the confidence to expose myself to something new and do things that I was scared of. So I tried the one thing that I was terrified of: intensive one-to-one therapy. Throughout the pandemic, and perhaps I'm not the only one here, my mental health took a toll. I struggled to stay optimistic and felt frustrated and angry with all the changes and regulations that would occur. I studied in public health. I understood all the reasons as to why the sacrifices needed to be made and continue to be made. And I worked in a hospital. And so I was saddened to see my colleagues risk their lives to support others, all while enduring burnout and frustration with the way that the pandemic was going. As I mentioned earlier, part of my role consisted of reviewing suicides that not only occurred within the hospital, but also outside of the hospital. There's one patient who brought me to tears. Out of respect, I won't go into too much detail, but this patient was on the same painkillers that I was on when I was younger, with the only difference that when I decided to take myself off, this patient went on to heroin instead. I remember reading this patient's chart and crying my eyes out in the bathroom. The story was so sad that I can remember it like it was yesterday, even till this very day. I recognized that the role of my own mental health needed to take a priority, and that the pandemic was actually taking a toll on me. So I realized I needed to take on a new fight. All those bullying thoughts were interrupted with Muay Thai, but they were never eliminated. So I sought out a counselor. I decided to work hard on addressing the root causes of the negative thoughts that they occurred and get at the crux of what was getting in my way. One key negative thought that stayed with me, and some others may sympathize with it, is that since I live with a mental health condition, I am not normal. This thought would always cause a myriad of emotions for me. For example, it would make me feel worthless, defective, lonely, hopeless, frustrated, and angry, to say the least. I think the best way to describe it was one phrase that I read from the philosopher Thomas Hobbes, where life of man is solitary, nasty, brutish, and short. So I decided to start working on addressing the negative thoughts that I had, but I also recognized that I needed the tools in order to help me get better. Muay Thai had already shown me that I didn't need to be perfect. All I needed to do was try. And so I tried, and I focused on trying to get to the root cause of why normalcy was so important. I looked at all my emotions, and I ranked how they would feel, typically from scores ranging from 80 to 100 in terms of sadness, despair, hopelessness. And then I learned something that sticks with me till this very day about depression. Depression is effective at staying pervasive as long as those cognitive distortions that are ruminating within the brain are believed to be true. Now, I'll say that not as a generalized statement, but that was the truth that I experienced. When I make references to cognitive distortions, I'm thinking about a series of different distortions in particular. I won't go through the entire list, but there were many distortions that stood out when I was going through this thought. For example, I'm thinking about the fact that I was not normal. I was labeling myself, which, if I attempt to positively reframe, I would also have to recognize that I'm also a person with many other labels. I'm an academic. I'm a researcher. I'm a project manager. I'm a good son, a loving fiance, and I care. If I was to think further, I would also see how I was engaging in all or nothing thinking, since I am more than just a label that I was self-imposed upon myself. Lastly, I would use a concept called radical acceptance of my circumstances. This is where I would accept the fact that maybe I'm not actually conventionally normal, but perhaps there's still something that I could be proud of within that sense of abnormality. Now, I recognize that even as I say that, there's a label there, but there is something that came from that radical acceptance. I was different. I am different. We're all different in our own way. The concept of normalcy was always so important to me since I felt very different from others. Whether it was due to race, whether it was due to feeling small in stature, whether it was coming from a low-income household, or feeling like I always felt like I needed to prove something to everyone else. I always felt like it was connected to my sense of self-worth and that it would connect me to finding that happy, loving life that I had. I am happy to say that I have that life even while thinking about all the variations of myself today. I know that I am myself and I can feel the love and support of others who know me for who I am. But more than that, the label itself, as strong as I believed it to be, was nothing more than a distortion. We're all different in our own ways. We define what can be normal to ourselves. During the pandemic, we all experienced a new sense of normalcy, one that would have been considered abnormal as of a couple of years ago. And yet, we can all sit here today knowing that we have been persistent and strong in managing the circumstances that have been placed upon us in some of the most challenging times of our history. So, I'd like to leave everyone with a few thoughts. First, never be afraid to try to do something new, especially if you're experiencing different challenges. One of the best things that you can possibly do in life is expose yourself to something that scares you. Muay Thai terrified me. It scared me so much. It made me feel as if I was incapable at the very beginning, and upon walking out, it made me feel like I was strong. And the same rules apply to physical activity. The same rules apply to therapy. The same rules apply to reaching out, trying to get support. Second, physical activity and physical health is so strongly connected to the mental health that sometimes physical activity is required to get out of your head and back into your body. There were many years where I went through depression, but with Muay Thai there, I didn't require the need of antidepressants. It's a very, very impactful feeling to know that there are different ways to be able to survive, especially when times are so challenging. So, know that physical health and mental health, they are interrelated. And sometimes maybe you have to just expose yourself and give yourself a shot in terms of seeing and trying something new. Third, despite the pervasiveness of depression, there are methods to get around it, whether that be through therapy, medications, or physical activity. Lastly, I want to recognize and acknowledge the fact that a sport like Muay Thai is around $140 a month. It's expensive. It's challenging to be able to enter into things like that. And so here, I stand here talking about how important it is to me because I am also a person who advocates for the need for more resources to be able to be placed into our communities, to allow people to have that opportunity to go and try something new that may be that thing that helps provide a bit of mental wellness in a way that they may not have ever felt before. So I conclude with saying that I am happy to have shared my story with all of you today. If you have not tried Muay Thai, I would definitely say give it a shot. And ultimately, I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.